What is up, and welcome back to CFB Saturdays. Today, I'm going to be taking a look at the ACC and ranking the teams from worst to best for the 2026 season. So just sit back, relax, like, comment, subscribe, and let's go ahead and get right into it. Starting with my number 17 team at the very bottom, I have Boston College. And I have always been very low on Bill O'Brien since he got to Boston College as a head coach, and he continues to prove me right. The Eagles continue to land towards the bottom of the conference, and this year will be, I think, the worst year yet under Bill. They just don't have the players. The quarterback left, the leading rusher left, the leading wide receiver left, and so did 26 other players on the roster. They brought 25 players in, but the additions they did bring in don't really do anything for me. I don't trust the quarterback they brought in Mason McKenzie, or Madison McKenzie, sorry. I don't trust that the ground game has gotten any better. I don't think they will have success through the air, considering what they lost. So even if they beefed up the front line, there just isn't a lot of scoring potential, in my opinion. And the defense was abysmal last season, and I think they're going to be abysmal again this season. So when you have a bad roster and a bad staff, odds are you're a pretty bad team. And that is exactly what I'm expecting Boston College to be, which is why I have them here at the very bottom of the ACC. With some teams, I can at least see the potential for them to outperform my expectations. But I just don't think the ceiling is very high for Boston College, and the floor is about as low as I think it could be. So yeah, they're here at number 17. At number 16, I have Stanford, and Stanford has not won more than 4 games since 2018. Let that sink in. So if we're looking at trends, the future of Stanford football does not look very bright. Andrew Luck handpicked a brand new head coach for the Cardinal and Tavita Pritchard from the NFL in hopes that he could bring in some winning culture back. But is it going to work? Probably not. Why? Well, for one, again, like with Boston College, they just don't have the players. It doesn't matter how much experience he has as a coach, especially when he's coaching players like Jaden Daniels, which is great, but the roster is not there. And besides, we saw Pritchard at the OC as the OC for Stanford before. He was part of those 4 or less win seasons. They're going to be an okay offensive line, an okay ground game, but I just don't see how they plan to pass the ball on defense. They're fine. There's some talent there, but calling it a strength would be a stretch as well. They give up a ton of yards through the air, and they can't really get into the backfield, so I'm not expecting them to have a good year by any means. Probably another 4-win season at best. At number 15, I have Wake Forest, and Jake Dickert had a great first year with the Demon Deacons, but unfortunately, most of those pieces that made up last year's team are gone. And what's left is far less exciting, in my opinion. They brought in Gio Lopez to play quarterback from North Carolina, and to say Lopez had a rough start at North Carolina would be an understatement. But maybe Dickert sees some potential that I don't see. And even if he is better than I expect, he is once again in a bad situation at Wake Forest. The offensive line provides major questions when it comes to physicality, and while I have a lot more faith in their defense, I think they're going to be on the field a lot, which is not a recipe for success. I just don't see a lot of anything about this roster that I genuinely like, but I like the coach, and they have some momentum after last season, so maybe they are a sleeping giant, and I'm just not seeing it or not expecting it. Number 14, I have North Carolina. Bill Belichick is still there. I did not drink the Kool-Aid whenever he got there last year because I knew that the NFL and college football are entirely different sports. So I was not going to expect some massive year out of Bill Belichick, and I'm not expecting a massive turnaround here in year 2 with him. The only thing I like about this North Carolina team is the addition of OC Bobby Petrino. I know that he didn't pan out at Arkansas because, they were pretty much unfixable, and honestly, North Carolina also feels unfixable as well, so I'm not sure how effective he's going to be there, but I do think he is a heck of a coach. So even though I do think that he will field a better offense than North Carolina had last season, I don't think it will be nearly good enough. It is also really hard to get a feel for what the team will look like since it seems like pretty much everyone and their mom portaled out. So this is a pretty new team, but I think it's going to have a lot of the same problems. I'm pretty lukewarm on what they brought in. Billy Edwards at quarterback is fine. The running backs are okay, and they're just not a lot to love through the air. It's just a very unexciting team. The defense last season was quietly the strength of the team. All the players for that unit are pretty much gone, though. But if those guys that they brought in can replicate that, it would provide something of note, at least for the Tar Heels. I just don't see a path for them this year, though. At number 13, I have Syracuse. And Syracuse was a complete dumpster fire after Stephen Jelly got hurt last season. I mean, it got disgusting, not safe for TV bad. However, if you remember before that, Syracuse was cooking and that offense was humming. Well, Angeli is back and he is healthy. And if he does go down again, Syracuse brought in a much better backup option. And I'm not going to give up on Fran Brown either after one bad year with an injured quarterback. I still think that he knows what he's doing there. And sure, a lot of talent did leave for the portal, but they brought in some guys, particularly a new receiver that I have a lot of faith in. There are still a lot of holes, though. The O-line looks rough. I don't think that, or I don't know what to expect from the run game. And even with Angeli, it's hard to forget how anemic to scoring Syracuse was last season. And I have very little faith in this Syracuse defense, which was awful before and after Angeli went down. So they do have a new DC, and I think that he should be a lot better, but there's just a lot to fix here. They should be at least better up front. It would be hard for them to be worse. I think Syracuse under Fran Brown is on the right track, and I just don't think that they will see a lot of success this year in particular, but down the line, I do think that Syracuse will shoot up on my list. At number 12, I have Duke, and they are the defending ACC champs. But they were not able to win the legal battle to keep Darren Mensah at quarterback. He was the heart and soul of the team, but he left for Miami, and he also brought their number one pass catcher, Cooper Barkay, with him, which was a huge hit for the Blue Devils along with the other guys that they lost. And Duke did the best they could replacing what they did lose, and I do have a lot of faith in Manny Diaz as a head coach, but I just think that what they lost is too great. It's hard to imagine Duke lost what they did and somehow end up being a better team. I don't know a lot about the quarterback they brought in, but I don't expect him to fill Mensah's shoes very well, and I just don't see a lot to be excited about in the passing game. But while I don't see as much to impress me on the offensive side of the ball, I do know I can lean on Manny Diaz when it comes to the defensive side of the ball. And Duke is used to proving people wrong, so maybe they have everything figured out behind the curtains, and we just don't know it yet, but I'm just a little skeptical on that. At number 11, I have Pitt. And last year, we saw the true freshman Mason Heichel take over at quarterback, and Pitt was really just brought to life by him. And he's coming back, which is really huge for the Panthers. And Pat Narduzzi is a great coach, but I do have some real questions about the supporting cast. They lost a lot of players, and they didn't bring in a lot of good ones, so they're really going to be trusting in internal development. That is too improving for me to just trust in the fact that they are playing for a great head coach like Narduzzi, but still, they were really weak in some areas. They lost some of that top-end talent they did have, and the guys they brought in as replacements just aren't as exciting. However, I do think that retaining Cade Bell at OC was obviously a huge win for them. I expect there to be some standout players that come out of nowhere for Pitt, but will it be enough? I tend to think probably not. And defense is usually pretty solid under Narduzzi, so I expect to see a similarly solid defense this season as well. And with a great coach, a stud quarterback, anything can happen. But I do think that this is kind of a team that will have to be scrappy, and they could pull off some kind of random upset, but not a team that I think will see consistent success. I expect them to have some head-scratching wins and some head-scratching losses. So at number 10, I have, unfortunately, my Florida State Seminoles. They have been really tough to watch the past few years, and I have gotten to the point where, with Mike Norvell, that I've really just given up hope. Mike Norvell has to go, but the organization just cannot afford to fire him right now. Everybody and their mom wants him fired at this point, but he has a chokehold on the organization at this point because of that insane contract. So this year, I'm going to have to suffer through another season where I just want to pull my hair out or put my head through a wall this season. Last year, I felt like we had a great team from a roster perspective. Heck, statistically, Florida State looked awesome, but coaching was, coaching and self-inflicted wounds held us back in every heartbreaking game. Mike Norvell has built a culture at Florida State where the moment something doesn't go their way, they just collapse and give up. They just are a soft team, and they have a soft culture this year. We still have some dogs that stayed, like Deuce Robinson at receiver, and they had a really decent portal class, actually, but the roster isn't and has not been the problem. And I really don't know how to feel about Ashton Daniels coming in at quarterback. He has a lot of talent, and we saw some of those flashes he had at Auburn, but he's young, he's immature, and I think that this team needs a veteran leader to change the locker room culture to lift them up. when things go sideways, and I just don't know if Daniels is the guy to do that. On the field, I think that he will have high highs and pretty low lows. I lean towards optimism, though, about what he brings to the table, but I'm going to keep going back to the fact that no matter what I do or do not like about this roster, I do not trust the staff, especially now that Gus Malzahn has gone at OC, who had Florida State at the number one statistical offense in the ACC for all that it's worth. To me, Florida State broke when Jordan Travis's ankle broke. After getting unfairly left out of the playoffs, the program crashed and burned and still hasn't gotten off the mat. It seems very similar to what Florida went through with the shoe toss. I just don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, which is really sad for a brand that should be a premier brand in the sport. I have them this high because, like I said, there are things I really like about the roster, and with a different coaching staff, I think they could soar. But until we cut out the weeds, like Mike Norvell, and plant a new tree with new culture, Florida State will continue to sit there towards the bottom of the conference. And I just don't even know if I hope that I don't know if I hope to be wrong, honestly, because if Florida State outperforms my expectations, they may decide to keep Norvell for another year, which would just prolong my misery. The players deserve better than this, the fans deserve better than this, and college football deserves better than this. So Florida State is at 10. At number 9, I have North Carolina State, and C.J. Bailey is back, and that alone is reason for optimism in Raleigh. He is an absolute dog, and at his best, I think that he is the best quarterback in the ACC. I know that's a very hot take. The problem is they had him last year too, and they ended up going 4-4 in conference play, and they lost a ton of talent around him to the portal, which, is what it is. Every team loses that talent, but they brought in some guys that I don't think look as good or stack up the same as what they lost. They got stronger up front for sure, but there are less weapons at their disposal. So a lot is going to be put on Bailey's shoulders this season. And it's not like they have a stellar defense to lean on either. They're solid, but not enough to bail out the offense if it doesn't get going. Dave Doran has done a pretty solid job keeping North Carolina State consistently solid, but never getting over that hump. North Carolina State feels more like a stepping stone school for other programs, and that makes it really hard for them to find long-term success. But again, CJ Bailey is an incredible player, and I think that he will keep them in a lot of games. But at the end of the day, I think that the mass exodus of players will be felt. At number 8, I have Cal. And they have a heck of a quarterback returning in JKS. I can't say his actual full name because it's too difficult for me, but he's back, and that is huge. As a true freshman, he went off, so keeping him on the roster was a massive win and allowed Cal to secure the second best portal class in the ACC behind only Miami. A lot of that help is on the offensive side of the ball to support that ultra-talented quarterback, so Tosh Lupoi has a lot to work with in his first year as a head coach for the Golden Bears, and the new OC should really help the offensive attack as well, especially when it comes to the passing game. Lots of firepower, but I do have questions about how balanced they can be. The O-line is a big concern for me, and so is ground production. They lost some major pieces on defense as well. However, they portaled in some difference makers in the secondary, and Tosh Lupoi is a defensive-minded head coach, so I think he's going to bring in some of that grit and culture with him to elevate this defense. Cal looks sneaky good to me this season. I have some concerns, sure, particularly in the trenches, but I think this team could be a sneaky dark horse. At number 7, I have Georgia Tech, and they are a very difficult team for me to rank because on one hand, they lost the heartbeat of their team. They had lived on the shoulders of their quarterback, Haynes King, for the past 2 years, and now he's gone along with the backup. They lost their amazing OC, Buster Faulkner. They lost their star running back in Jamal Haynes. They lost a lot of production on defense, and I think it's hard for a team like Georgia Tech to just reload after that many big-name losses. So I don't know what the identity of this team will be with so much change happening, but I do love Brent Key as a head coach. What he has done for Georgia Tech cannot be understated. I think that he has recruited well and developed really well, and I think they made some very interesting portal moves that could provide a lot of success. Starting with the addition of quarterback Albert Mendoza. I know that last name sounds familiar to you because he is the brother of the Fernando Mendoza. That's right, the Heisman-winning, national championship-winning quarterback who transferred to Indiana last year. If he's anything close to what his brother was, then Georgia Tech is in good hands. But that's the thing. We have no idea. So is there too much stock being put into that last name, or is it valid to have that much stock in that last name? I mean, Fernando once said that his brother would be an even better quarterback than he was, so we'll have to wait and see if his brother's words are accurate. I, for one, do not think that he will pop off in his first year as a starter with the Yellow Jackets, but Who knows? They also brought in Justice Haynes from Michigan to replace Jamal Haynes on the ground, and I don't think that Justice can fill those same shoes, but he's a very solid back at the very least and a great get for them. So I can see Georgia Tech really falling almost anywhere on this list. There's a lot of variability here. Part of me thinks that I'm a little too low on them for as good as a coach that Brent Key is, but the losses they had just feel too big for me, so I lean towards them falling off just a little bit. But for you Georgia Tech fans out there, I think that the down year I expect this year is not indicative of where I see this program going. Under Brent Key, I think they are going to be right back near the top in the near future. At number 6, I have Clemson, and it feels very, very weird having Clemson this low, but after last year, I just cannot justify putting them towards the top of the conference. I believed in the hype last year. They look like bona fide contenders, but they were nowhere even close when it came down to it, so I have recalibrated my expectations for what a Dabo Swinney Clemson team can be in the modern era of college football. I am not a fan of where college football is at with NIL and the transfer portal and everything else that's going on. And I have tremendous respect for Dabo Swinney in the way that he wants to do things and for sticking to it. But I just think that the game has passed him by, and he did a little, too late. And I just don't see them climbing back to the mountaintop anytime soon. I thought last year was their last real shot they had to pull themselves back up into the conversation, but I think that it's all downhill from them from here. They didn't do a lot with the returning production they had last season. Now a lot of those guys are gone, including their quarterback, Cade Klubnik, and sure, they dipped into the portal a little bit more than usual, but again, it's too little too late. So I don't see it working for them. I also have no idea what to expect from that quarterback room. They didn't pick up a transfer, so they're trusting in development there, which makes me uneasy because it doesn't seem like they have been doing very well at developing talent, considering what they rolled out last year with all that returning production. There's just a lot of unknowns with Clemson. They definitely have a talented roster, and Dabo is a great coach in many ways. I mean, he really elevated Clemson to new heights and to put them on the map to where they are now, but I just don't think things will turn for the better for them this season. So I end up lower on them than most people. We're going to see how it goes. At number 5, I have Virginia Tech, and they knocked it out of the park when they hired James Franklin. I know that Penn State fans were upset with him because he couldn't get them over the hump, but he's also the coach that brought them the consistency and success that they have been enjoying the past few years. And expectations in Blacksburg are not the same as they are in Happy Valley. I think Franklin is the perfect kind of coach to rebuild a program like Virginia Tech and bring them the stability that they actually need. I think that they will be very happy with what he brings to the table. Will it all come together in year one? Honestly, I'm not sure. It's a pretty big shift from the way that Virginia Tech has been used to running their program, so there could be some learning curves to hurdle. I think I said that right. But to me, it's not a matter of if Franklin works out in Blacksburg, it's when. Franklin brought in a lot of guys from the Penn State roster that, even though they were a little bit disappointing last season, talent was not the issue for the Nittany Lions. So the guys that Franklin is bringing over are pretty high-level guys that the Hokies have not had and have been missing for the past few years. That includes the quarterback, Ethan Grockemeyer, and the tight end, Luke Reynolds, along with other transfers like wide receiver, Keyshawn Brown from Duke. They had the 4th best portal class in the ACC, so lots of incoming talent. My main concern here is whether Virginia Tech is ready up front for the transition of Franklin's style of offense. They have some guys that are ready, but I just don't really know if it's fair to expect that unit to make that big of a jump this season. I can easily see a world where they struggle this year and underperform, but I can also see a world where Franklin instantly elevates them and puts them at a spot where they can be capable of a lot more. At number 4, I have Virginia, and they were the Cinderella story of the ACC last year, despite being predicted to finish last, or near the bottom at least, of the conference. A lot of that had to do with the schedule, but even still, Tony Elliott has been punching above his weight at Virginia. They had some guys from that team that left, obviously, and this is a different team, but I think Elliott has shown what is possible for the Cavaliers, and I don't expect a massive fall-off from them this season. They brought in Eli Holstein from Pitt, who didn't pan out as well as expected for a variety of different reasons. But he actually ended up getting benched there for Mason Heischel, who we talked about at Pitt, but I still think he has a lot of potential. And Bo Pribula transferred there as well, but I would be surprised if he started, and if he does, well, then I think that we're having a very different conversation about Virginia, and I think there are a few spots lower, to be honest, because I am not a Bo Pribula guy. But either way, whoever they go with, Virginia is going to have a former Power 4 starting quarterback at backup, which is more than most teams can say. Surrounding the quarterback, Virginia dipped very heavily into the portal during the offseason to bring in new guys in almost every position room. Last year, it paid off for them, but with the portal, you just never know. So they are a bit of a wild card here. Was last year just a lightning in the bottle situation, or does Virginia have the formula to develop those, transfers, or just have good transfer evaluation? Time's going to tell. I'm leaning towards having faith in them just because I like some of the guys they brought in. After losing their top pass catchers, they brought in some veteran guys that I think they're going to hit on. The offensive line looks to be even better than last season. I do have a lot of questions about the ground game. They brought in some guys, but I just don't know if it's going to be enough to make them really super solid on the ground, in my opinion. So that's a question mark for me, and I will keep a close eye on that position throughout the season. As for defense, I like what they have up front, but they really need those transfers in the secondary to hit. But overall, I think Virginia will have another very solid year. Number 3, I have Louisville. And Louisville's a team that always seems to profile on that tier 2 of the conference, not quite up there with the leaders in the conference, but at that top of the next tier, I would say. And I think that that's once again the case this season. In case you're wondering, I think that the top of this conference only has one team in it, which we'll get to in a minute, although I'm sure that you can probably guess which team that is. Anyways, Jeff Brom has been very successful for the Cards at keeping them towards the top of the conference, and I put a lot of value in what he brings to the table as a coach. They bring in Lincoln Kienholz, who was the backup at Ohio State, who got a lot of buzz, and we know Brom is up there with the best in the game at developing quarterbacks, so I expect him to be a breakout star this season, and I like that they added the added mobility that he brings to the table. And I think that the offense as a whole will see a bit of a facelift around him. I like what they have in the running back room. I like what they have up front on offense, specifically on the interior. As we know that Louisville always has that, a receiver that, or two receivers that just come out of the shadows and dominate. So I think there's a lot of optimism here surrounding the offense. I do worry about inexperience a bit with the quarterback they brought in, but again, I trust Brom that he can squeeze every bit of potential they have out of this guy. And honestly, I think that the defense will surprise a lot of people as well. So I think Louisville is a very well-rounded team and actually has a higher ceiling than the team I have above them, but I also think they have a lower floor as well. I would not be surprised to see Louisville making the ACC championship game at the end of the season, but I also wouldn't be surprised to see them having a disappointing season either. Number 2, I have SMU. Rhett Lashley and Kevin Jennings are running it back. They look bigger, stronger, and deeper than ever, especially up front. I think they have an incredible staff with Lashley at the head coach position. I think Kevin Jennings has a super high ceiling at quarterback, even if he has been a bit inconsistent at times. He's more experienced now, and I think that will serve him very well. I think SMU has punched above their weight since entering the ACC. I think their roster will allow them to continue to do that. They didn't have as robust of a portal class as they have had in the past few years, but that could actually be a sign that their base roster is stronger without the need to inject so much portal talent. I think they've really brought their roster to a level that can compete in a power conference, especially the ACC. That doesn't mean that they're without their issues, but I think that they need to see some more success running the ball, and they lost some pretty high-level pass catchers. But I do think that some of the guys are ready to step up. I think that they made the right additions, and I think that this team is ready to take that next step and continue to wreak havoc on the ACC. But there's a pretty large gap between them and my number 1 team, and if you haven't guessed it already, it's unfortunately the Miami Hurricanes. It's probably the easiest number 1 of any conference I've done predictions for. There really isn't anyone else in the same tier as Miami this season, in my eyes, in the ACC. As painful as that is to admit, I have not drank the Kool-Aid on Miami for the past few years, but no amount of delusion can convince me that Miami is not entering the season as the number 1 team in the ACC. However, I said the same thing about Clemson last year, and so many media outlets did as well. So hopefully that's the case. Hopefully I'm super wrong. But I think that Miami, what they have on their roster is far and away just above what everyone else in the conference has. I am not a huge believer in Mario Cristobal as a coach. I think that he makes terrible game decisions, especially late in the game. I think that he's just puts the team in positions where they are very compromised, but he also took the team to a national championship game last year. So, I was wrong. And they once again brought in a stud quarterback in Darian Mensah. He is the best quarterback in the conference, I think, maybe behind only CJ Bailey at his best. But again, consistency-wise, I think Mensah is better and just the overall better quarterback. Definitely a dual threat, much better than Carson Beck. And he brought some guys from Duke with him, and I think that they're going to be elite, like Cooper Barkate, like I mentioned earlier. And that's in addition to the insane weapons they already had, like Malachi Toney and Mark Fletcher Jr., who are just nightmares to play against. You lose some crazy defensive pieces like Ruben Bain and Akeem Messidor. But they still have a ton of talent, and they crushed it in the transfer portal. I think they're going to have a much better offensive performance, even if we don't see the same level of defensive performance. But yeah, no question, this roster seems to be far and away the best in the conference, and I think that overall Miami will be an even better team than the one that competed for a national championship last year. Again, I really hope I'm wrong. But anyways, that's going to do it for this video. Please, again, make sure that you like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.